Business podcast. My name is Alexei, and today I want to talk about business strategy. Now, a lot of business owners I meet hardly have got an exit strategy, which is obviously quite an issue in the long perspective. And in the grand scheme of things, it's not always clear as to where the business is going and how to exit a business. So I totally understand why that happens. However, if you look at a business from the perspective of success, most people go with the whole goal methodology where they set up goals, whether they specifically try to put KPIs and deadlines, and it's a fairly straightforward, effective approach, I would say. However, in the longevity of the business, it's something that doesn't quite work. And if you are to sort of look at things black and white without considering the seasonality and external factors like COVID, for example, that just fails because you just can't control the external factors, and there's so many things that could actually go wrong. Besides that, every business has got quite a lot of uncertainty as to, how is the customer's journey going? How is the buyer's confidence specifically happening at this present moment, and so on? And as a result, oftentimes people don't really get the success they're after, and they sort of try to judge things by those goals and KPIs and so on. And as a result, you obviously put quite a lot of pressure on your team, and this is where some chaos really arises because not everyone is resilient to this thing. So there is a concept of finite game versus the infinite game, and this is a concept I learned from one of Simon Sinek's books called The Infinite Game, and it's really more about the mindset of business owners. And if you are to sort of look at a picture from a bigger, broader perspective, you'll find that the larger organizations typically go with this infinite approach because there's just a lot of room for uncertainty. And sometimes if you look into, obviously, events like the GFC or COVID and so on, you need to think like that in order to be able to, sustain companies' operations and overall direction of the company as well. Changing things on the fly is difficult, as you know. The bigger the company gets, the harder it is. Many of you may be working by yourselves, and if that's the case, it's typically quite easy for you to adjust things as need be. Your overheads may be low. However, if you got multiple people working for you, that's where the entire the chaos really starts to arise, because if you have a plan to go with the one approach and then things suddenly change, it's very difficult to slow things down or stop and refocus. And obviously it causes quite a lot of stress as well, which is I'm not a big fan of. Every time there's stress involved, that's something I consider a red flag straight away. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of processes within a business. I like to look at businesses from the perspectives of marketing, sales, operations, and accounting. It can obviously be much more complicated than that. However, if you look at it from these perspectives, I think having infinite mindset, specifically when it comes to sales and marketing, and at the same time having isolated parts of the process with clear defined goals and KPIs, I think in my opinion works the best. However, if you look into the whole infinite game, and obviously, check out the book by Simon Sinek. It is a great read. I personally prefer listening to it using Audible. It's really more about, where businesses have failed, and, it's potentially just a lack of long-term vision. And vision and goals don't always don't always align. Sorry. The whole vision of the business may be so distant, and oftentimes this is where we as small businesses, can't really commit to it because it's too risky. So, if you can improve your sales process based on the fact that you are aiming for multiple interactions as opposed to a single interaction with a customer, that's one step towards the infinite game, because ultimately what you want is, people coming back to you for more business, recommending you, people working with you based on your reputation, help you create that reputation as well. If you look at the whole classic marketing funnel, the last part of the funnel is loyalty. And this is the one thing that a lot of businesses don't even enable. And I think that's the one thing that really requires that infinite mindset in order to activate that. I think, you got to really understand how your business performs against everybody else. I'm a big advocate that your business needs to be unique. If you do the same thing as somebody else, typically that's only as good as you can do, unless there's obviously some secret sauce or some unique processes behind the things. And look, it's obviously difficult to do that if you are not very creative, or you run a business as an owner operator, or maybe just starting out. But I think it really helps to potentially identify, what the overall trend in the market is, what the competitors are doing, and how you could potentially differentiate yourself from that approach of infinite mindset. So I think, overall, the growth of the business is the one thing you probably won't be able to feel very well unless you actually have got prior experience to it. So the one thing that people don't quite understand is how to work with other people. And when you start building a team, it's obviously a lot easier if you train these people according to the way you do things. And my biggest advice is, try to keep things simple. Don't overload the one person with multiple tasks, because this is where typically people fail. Personally, I like using a personality profiling approach. I use a system called Wealth Dynamics, which helps me sort of identify the strength and weakness of these people. And I guess why this is important is because if you're able to align the tasks of a particular person with a strength, typically you get a much happier, better environment from that person, and then you're able to create synergy, obviously, with yourself and other team members as well. That's been, an absolute game changer for myself. I've built my entire business based on this philosophy. And I think if you understand that, you should be able to apply the whole infinite mindset to it, which would then help you create resilience. Because if something unknown comes along, which obviously will cause quite a fair bit of anxiety, can be potentially contained with that vision. So I guess in the sense of business strategy and where you guys sit, it's all very personal. It's all very different. There's no right and wrong. It's just really more about, why do some businesses, last for 5 years and people move on, and why do other businesses, go for generations and potentially become something that is quite unique and people do really want to follow and be associated with. I mean, I think there's obviously a level of value as well. If you're going to work with a business that's been around for a very long time, that reputation, that point of difference itself that the time creates, does create a competitive edge for the business. Like, for example, look at Qantas, an airline. Obviously, things have been quite patchy over COVID, and the entire industry has been obviously in a lot of turmoil. However, if you look into the world rankings for the safest airlines, Qantas is still number one. And look, there's obviously multiple sources that you can check. Latest I've seen was a Forbes article about something like that. And, despite all, this is something that still allows them to be a premium airline in Australia and be positioned like that on the global market as well. So I think that's a great example of the infinite game and how potentially they focus on that. Because if you're going to look at it from the perspective of looking at episodes as to how they dealt with things are not great. Letting people go, potentially acquiring or selling parts of the business, it's quite difficult. It's quite stressful in the short term. Potentially not something you'd be able to identify by having a clear goal and KPIs. It just simply doesn't work like that. And some of you may be thinking, well, yeah, Qantas, obviously a large international companies. Well, they weren't always like that. They obviously started somewhere. And I think you really need to understand as to where your business is going and what the limit is. I mean, the sky's really the limit for most businesses. Yes, you're going to run into issues with operations. Yes, you're going to run into issues with logistics and so on. But, it's just about thinking bigger. For that reason, we've obviously got companies like Uber or Airbnb that think completely outside the box. And in reality, they're the companies that have no property or taxis in order to conduct the service. At the same time, they do focus on the outcome. And I think this is the one thing that really aligns with the infinite game is the outcome. If you're going to think about the outcome that your business creates, sometimes it's actually not exactly what you think it may be. And talking to maybe some of your clients may be a good way to sort of start understanding what the actual solution is. And I find that it's quite interesting that every single business may be conducting a simple service. So, for example, a plumber may be fixing taps, but in reality, it's a matter of fixing a problem that allows a family to have, let's say, hot water or be able to use something. And it's typically the solution creates a much bigger outcome than often the business owner thinks, based on the actual dynamics of what they do on a day-to-day basis. And look, I understand you get really zoomed into what you do, at present. and it's very difficult to zoom out. I call this the helicopter view, that sometimes you really need to zoom out to see the bigger picture and understand where is your marketing, where is the customer, how you sell to them, what works, what doesn't work, and how you can get potentially more of the ideal customers. And I think a story or this infinite game view is really something that enables it. Anyway, I highly recommend the book. You guys definitely should check it out if you're into Simon Sinek. There's probably a few other books that you may want to have a look at as well. Overall, I think you got to think a little bit bigger in the sense of where you want to be, because the moment you stop, you just get into this whole transactional mode. And then one thing I find myself is you stop valuing your time. You start doing everything yourself, and this is where you fall into this trap of potentially not valuing what your time is worth. And it's something that's sometimes hard to pull out of because you sort of get used to doing things your own way. But if you look at it on the grand scheme of things and try to identify, okay, so if I was to spend less time, what could I do more productively, and what sort of results would I get? So anyway, guys, I just want to get you thinking on this topic. And if you got some, examples of the infinite game or something you're doing already, please share. And if you guys are enjoying this podcast, please make sure that you recommend it to your friends and hit the subscribe button, whichever platform you're on. We're on YouTube as well. That seems to be the flavor that gets most people. But we also know the biggest podcasting platforms like Spotify, Apple, and so on as well. Anyway, guys, have a great day, and I'll chat to you soon.